Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeiedag, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And the subject of tonight's live stream is going to be topical events in South Africa, including the threat by Julius Malema to shut down South Africa on the 20th of March this year. We'll get an update of that from my guest tonight, Narendh Ganesh. And without any further ado, I'm going to cross to Narendh now, and here we go. Good evening, Narendh. How are you?
Well, I should rather say good morning to you. It's good evening here.
Yeah, it's so true, so true. Just at 4 o'clock in the morning here, but I love what I do. Now, Narendh, we've got a wide variety of subjects to discuss tonight, but one that I would like to just focus on initially is this threat by Julius Malema to shut down South Africa on the 20th of March. Can you give us a bit of background to that and what the latest news is on that particular issue?
Yeah, he had initially put out, these messages and these social media placards calling for a complete standstill of South Africa, suggesting that we bring down the economy on the 20th of March 2023. You know, nobody should go to work. Nobody should go to schools, universities should be closed, etc., etc. And as a rebuttal, because he did indicate that it's the constitutional right to do so, and his reason for that is to make President Cyril Ramaphosa resign his position as president. And I rebutted that with the statement that if it's a right of any person to protest, we don't have a problem with that. But it's equally the right of every person not to protest should they not agree with such a thing. Now, in the case of Julius Malema, as we have known in the past, he's a kind of rabble-rouser who speaks to his audience only to garner support. And, to try and encourage those who have nothing better to do than to bring the economy down. Now, the very people that he will be using in his protests are mostly the unemployed. And if you bring the economy down for a day, you are losing billions of rands in terms of productivity, services and goods provided. So in terms of that, I don't think many South Africans are going to respond. It will primarily be his supporters only. And I think it has come from many quarters that people are going to be resistant to such call. My only fear and hope is that it does not lead to violence, because any protest in South Africa is touted as a peaceful protest, but eventually it ends up in mayhem, looting, vandalism, and the like. And, we've had an experience recently in the 2021 July unrest, and we don't want it to degenerate into those levels of anarchy. And I just hope that that's how it's going to go, because apparently, and these are unconfirmed reports, that there might be a recall of that call to protest on that day. So we'll just have to play it by ear and see how it goes. But be assured, from my side, I will be making a call to citizens to express their rights and to exercise those rights. If they do not want to protest, they are allowed to go to schools, they are allowed to go to university, they are allowed to go to work. They are allowed to be an ordinary citizens for the day and not accede to a call from a politician who cares less about the country than anything else.
Right. Now, Narendh, you raised a very interesting point. You said you're going to be putting out a call. This is the first time we've actually had you on Loving Life TV. Do you want to give a little bit of your background to what you do in South Africa?
Well, at the moment, I in terms of a vocational aspect, I'm a labor consultant, but I have been involved in politics and social activism from school to university days. I stood for two local government elections, which I lost. One with a little small party, one with as an independent. That's 2021. Um, but unfortunately, I lost not because I was not capable, but it was because people went voting a party. And that's one of the problems that we have in South Africa, but
Yeah.
we'll address that later. And I've been quite vociferous in social media, taking on the president, taking on cabinet ministers, taking on the mayors and the speaker's office of national parliament on various issues. The sad part is I don't have a public platform. You know, sometimes it's more difficult from the outside to shout in than while being in to shout. I think Malema expresses that quite clearly when he's in parliament. So my activism is based and predicated purely on the fact that I need to leave South Africa a little better place than which I entered. But we need the help and support of every law-abiding South African citizen to come on board. Our politics has gone very toxic, and my involvement is purely in the interest of a better South Africa for all.
Right. Have you considered the SNP party? Because they're one that seems to be having pretty good ideals and values.
Okay, I haven't as yet considered. I have been approached by other political parties, some major ones, and I haven't made a decision yet, but the decision will be made within the next month or two going forward, because I presume the national elections will be in May next year. And the reason for that is there is a third option that has come about for the very first time, and that is individual citizens can stand as independent candidates.
Yes.
Now, at the moment, there's a bit of controversy with regard to that because the dynamics haven't been properly, put forth via the Electoral Commission.
Why are we surprised? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, well, look, it's not to any political party's advantage to have a constituency-based electorate. The proportional representation system that we have currently suits a lot of political parties. I mean, the DA, for example, will lose a lot of seats. The ANC will lose a lot of seats, like every other party. Because once you bring in an individual who is directly answerable to the electorate, people might want to look at that as an alternative to what we had for the almost last 30 years. And once that happens, we might see some real change in South Africa. But the problem with that is, if I'm not mistaken, Parliament wants to reserve 100 seats out of the 400 for independent candidates, something that I oppose because it's unconstitutional. And the fact that this matter was granted by the Constitutional Court but referred back to Parliament, because I don't think they wanted, as a legal entity, to interfere with the political system. You see, the only way the Electoral Act can be changed is in Parliament, not by the Constitutional Court. Our Constitution doesn't allow for that. But the very fact that we're going to have 300 seats available to parties will create another problem. And the simple reason for that is, why shouldn't that 400 seats be made available to everybody, including a free for all, with regards to the political parties as well as individual candidates? But there are obviously serious logistical problems with that in terms of a balance sheet. A ballot sheet? Sorry. What if you get 4,000 candidates? How does that play out? So they will have to demarcate constituencies, whether it's via provincial or some other mechanism that has to be clearly outlined in the Electoral Act. So those are complications, but I think it's a way forward. One of the things is I've always touted is that South Africa might be a democracy on paper, but we are not democratic, for the simple reason we do not elect parliamentarians directly. The only place where South Africa has some kind of democracy is at local government election, and only partly there, where you directly elect a person and the rest is proportional representation. And a government of, by, and for the people cannot go via a proxy, because we do not know what the political parties put up. I mean, without being nasty, if a political party literally puts up a monkey for a candidate, no one will know until the monkey is in Parliament.
Well, we got a lot of monkeys in Parliament at the moment, that's for sure. Just on that particular point, I just read an article where De Ruyter, who's resigned from Eskom, but he's still staying on until, I think, March.
March.
Yeah. Now, De Ruyter, in an interview he gave earlier today, said that the biggest problem Eskom has is that it's basically the cash cow for the ANC political party. And he estimates that about R1 billion a month is being filtered off by the ANC cadres. And this he specifically says the ANC cadres and politicians, because of the way they've actually set the place up. And he says that's the biggest problem Eskom is having. Now, I know this is kind of off the road of the constitutional or the political party side, but I think it's a very important issue. What are your thoughts about Eskom and what's going on there?
Look, historically, if we go back, South African, even prior to 94, the South African government was warned about our possible power crisis that might arise in the future. Be that as it may, when the Mandela government came in, they were also warned, but they didn't take heed of it because they didn't see the need to do so at that point in time, even during the Mbeki and Zuma era. So what has happened, and De Ruyter is correct, this has become a cash cow for a lot of, because the food chain is very long in the ANC, and everybody has to get a piece of the cake. So, I mean, if you look at the way the nature of low-grade coal has been used and how it was obtained and how our coal mines have been devalued in terms of the actual production, etc., etc., where is the money going to? Why is the crisis at the level that it is? It could have been averted had proper consultation taken place, where proper advice from those in the know, and obviously an incompetent government is liable to become corrupt, and we've got the glaring example of how this has happened. So the ANC that was prior to 94 is no longer what it is. A liberation movement is totally different from becoming a political party to govern. And that era of the initial people like Mbeki, Governor Mbeki, Walter Sisulu, etc., who were probably philosophical in their approach towards freedom of the country, are no longer here. Now the new generation is all about the loot, the public purse. And De Ruyter is absolutely correct. Look, I don't have evidence. I can only go by what he's saying because he's in the thick of things. And if he's saying that, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Well, look, I think one of the most corrupt ministers in the ANC government is Lindiwe Sisulu, the daughter of the old ANC elder. And typifies what goes on in the ANC ministry, where it's like musical chairs. She screws up the Department of Social Affairs, and then she goes to another department to screw that up. And I think she's now in tourism, which has been totally screwed up as well. And this is what they do. They don't actually put in people who are competent. They just move the incompetent, corrupt politicians from one ministry to another, and it's like a wrecking ball, just going right through the entire country.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And look, Lindiwe Sisulu, she probably rides on her father's fame. And like you said, the cadre deployment that is happening is only because they were associated with people who fought in the struggle, whether it was in South Africa, on the island, or who were outside the country. Lindiwe Sisulu is one of many of the cabinet ministers that have been appointed. I mean, Zuma played musical chairs so many times. I mean, he had a weekend special as a minister, Van Rooyen. And if you look at all those things, I truly believe that cabinet ministers need to be screened.
Yeah.
They need to be screened so well that they have capability. I mean, you can't be a minister of health if you do not have any experience in the health industry. You cannot be a minister of tourism if you did not have any experience in tourism itself. And this reshuffling of the cabinet, which is going to happen soon, is going to bring in a few surprises. I mean, we've got a new ministry that's about to be set up in the bloated cabinet that we already have. I mean, deputy ministers serve no purpose. Deputy ministers serve no purpose, yet we're getting a minister of electricity. Someone joked that we're going to get a minister of potholes. And that might be true. We desperately need one to re-navigate our roads.
Yeah, well, look, just on that point, did you know they've discovered a new species of animal in South Africa?
I know what's coming, but I don't know the species.
It's called replacing mitosis. And they're breaking out all over the roads everywhere. They can't get rid of them. Apparently they don't have any predators. Anyway, let's get back to the politics for a moment. And one of the guys who's a complete and utter joke, and he's probably in the most important portfolio considering crime, is Bekesele. I mean, I have to say, Narendh, I don't think the average IQ amongst the sitting ministers in Parliament is above 70. I'm pretty sure some of them are hovering around 50. Like people like Bekesele, he'd be really hard put to try and crack 50. And here you got these guys running incredibly important parts of South Africa's economy, and they're completely destroying it. And it's no surprise. I think what you said now, where there should be a competency test before a minister can be appointed, hits the nail on the head. And if they don't have an IQ over, let's say, 120, well, then they don't even feature, because you've got to be above average, not way below, close to delinquent.
Yeah. No, I would rather engage with them once their IQs reach double figures generally, but that's in another...
Yeah, you reckon they got a way to go, have you?
Yeah, a long way to go. But coming back to Bekesele,
yeah.
Look, he's as incompetent as you can get, only because he does not know how to handle the crime, the highly escalating crime in South Africa. And I can tell, I mean, just yesterday, or was it? Yeah, yesterday, a tourist couple were mugged in central Durban.
That was shocking. Yeah.
Now,
and the police were watching. There were two police watching. Yes. They didn't do anything.
Now, I speak of a personal. I've had 4 house invasions at my house. 4.
Wow.
With one murder, My mom passed away immediately after the second house invasion. So I know I'm an experienced victim, if I can put it that way, you know. But to date, no arrests have been made. And now this goes across the country. The kind of murders that are taking place, whether it's taxi violence, drive-by shootings. Now, I know crime is prevalent all over the world. I mean, that goes without saying. But in South Africa, there's a very good there's a good chance that we could have somebody who can take the bull by the horns and attack the criminals. But we firstly don't have the capacity. They always use the budget as an excuse. They do not have enough money. But as you said earlier on, Eskom has got enough money that's being looted that could be used otherwise. And Bheki Cele himself, I mean, during the 2021 unrest, which was quite a critical period,
Absolutely.
apparently he was not in communication with his National Commissioner of Police. They couldn't communicate as to the intelligence. Ramaphosa himself was not in communication. I mean, they were watching this thing happen on real time on television, and none of them acted. If they only but deployed police into strategic positions on roads, they would have prevented these mobs from looting and stuff like that. I had a confrontation with Bheki Cele personally when I rendered testimony at the Human Rights Commission on the Phoenix unrest. And I told him clearly, they were using that as an excuse to make it into a racial thing. It was a political matter that turned criminal that became used as a racial tool only to detract or digress from the real facts of where it started.
And do you know who that was pushed by? But let's face it, Narendh, that racial aspect was pushed by the fake mainstream media in South Africa. They said that some Indians in I think it was one of the suburbs of Durban had actually responded and killed a few Africans, and that was then a huge racist issue, and all they were doing was defending their houses. And I was speaking to one of our regulars on here, Muzi Nkosi, who's from the townships, and he says that every time Ramaphosa raises the race question or apartheid or Jan van Riebeck, the black community seem to go into this sort of kind of like they're hypnotized, and they forget about all the things that the ANC have done, and they start focusing on, it's a racism issue, and they lose track of what the actual issues are.
Yeah. Now, look, apartheid will always be a default excuse or reason. Depends how you view it. Anything that is not being done correctly, competently, or anything that is being considered as wrong or criminal will always be defaulted to the effects of apartheid. Now, going on to the fourth decade of our democracy, and I always use the word democracy in inverted commas, it's high time we shed that aspect, because every time we regress into the past, we lose vision of the future. And that is what's happening, because generations coming ahead will pay the price for our inaction and our deliberate intent of holding apartheid responsible for the rest of South Africa's history in the days ahead. And, if you look at what you just said about the fake media news, I actually had taken the Daily News, which is the one of the main newspapers, mainstream newspapers in Durban, in KwaZulu-Natal, to task. I had to report it to the ombudsman because on the second or third day of the riots, they had a headline, Phoenix Massacre. Now, Phoenix is a suburb you were referring to in which these deaths occurred. And, I challenged them that why isolate a few killings. There were about 356 people who died nationally, and there were about 36 Phoenix. So they took about 10% of the deaths and converted it into a massacre. What was the rest? Sporadic? Isolated? You see, so sometimes the media has the potential of instigating and perpetrating a narrative that's is very inflammatory and can rouse people's emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's just get back to the core of what we're talking about here. And earlier you were talking about the Constitution. I
Yeah,
don't believe the Constitution has been followed, not just in Parliament, but I think in the way that Parliament is run. I have absolutely no doubt that the Parliament is basically being run when it comes to making laws by NGOs, non-government organizations like Open Society Foundation, who are all over the parliamentarians like a rash. You take, for example, expropriation without compensation. That act was not drawn up by people within Parliament. It was drawn up by an organization called PLAS, which is based in Cape Town, and the lady who actually prepared that act or that law was Professor Ruth Hall, and PLAS is funded by Open Society Foundation. They were the
okay.
ones behind the actual formation of expropriation without compensation. So these acts, and the one with the gun law changes where you can't defend yourself and stuff like that, these laws are being prepared by Open Society Foundation, and then they're basically handed over to the minister, who then gets up in Parliament and reads out what they've been given. That this is how
Yeah,
completely destroyed the democracy in South Africa is.
yeah. Look, going back to the Constitution, our Constitution was prepared as a result of the pre-democratic discussions at CODESA, the Convention for a Democratic South Africa. And it was only as a result of the sunset clause that saved us from a lot of civil bloodshed. Because, the agreement was whoever participated at CODESA will participate in the first general election, and whoever gets the most number of votes, they will be divided by the number of votes cast, and a cabinet of 400, parliament of 400 will be established. And then after 1999, it was a free for all. That I can understand. But our constitution has got many aberrations that need revisit. For example, the one that I'm talking about, it speaks to we, the people of South Africa. Now, it also speaks to we, the non-racial, to a non-racial South Africa.
Mm.
Yet, ironically, we are a highly polarized and racial country. And the government, the ANC government specifically, have done nothing to alleviate that or to change the narrative. I mean, in every document that we sign or fill in these days, you have to indicate race. And I don't see the need for that. If you're a non-racial society, race does not come into play. They might claim that they need it for census purposes or statistical purposes. But why? We are South Africans. If we are classified South Africans, take the denominations out, because it was a very classification in the apartheid days that created the havoc that it did. So the Constitution has many flaws, and political parties are scared to revisit that. And the other problem that they might have is they need a 2/3 majority to change any specific, even a one word in the Constitution, you need a 2/3 majority. They might not get that. Things like every citizen has a right to stand for public office. It states clearly in the Constitution, the one that was adopted in 1996, 108 of the Constitution, that every citizen has the right to stand for public office and, if elected, must hold such office. That does not happen because it's political parties that are elected. And the expropriation of land, I'm not sure how that is going to work, because it's going to affect the economy.
It'll
There's a lot
destroy
of
the
land.
economy. The first
Yeah,
time they
yeah.
do that, they will destroy the economy, because no investor with half a brain will come and invest in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, take farmers who see to our food production on a daily basis. They've been killed. That irritates me, because I really am not interested in talking about white farmers or black farmers. I'm talking of farmers in
Yeah.
general. But it's predominantly the white farmers that are being killed, and that's wrong. and there's no action taken by the government at all. And they are the source of food production. I mean, we could very well become another Zimbabwe. We were a bread basket at one stage. Now we are a basket case, you know. And if we don't take enough action or stringent action against opposing these kind of things, then I'm afraid that we're going to pay a very, very dear price in the coming future.
Well, look, there's so many areas where things are going absolutely pear-shaped in South Africa. Look at the infrastructure. Look at Eskom. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the racial aspect. In fact, I've just got one question for this government. They've embraced the LGBTQPRY whatever uh, uh, objectives. Now, why can't a white person, under that sort of formula, put down their race as black? Because they might feel like they're a black person. You know, if you're going to allow a man to be a woman, and some people suggest they feel like they're a cat and they wear tails and they wear ears and shit like that. Why can't a white person then accordingly say, well, I'm actually feeling, or I feel like a black person, so I'm going to become a black person? You know, that kind of destroys that argument completely if you're going to give people those sort of freedoms. But just getting back to the situation here, and I just touched on that, black economic empowerment, that's completely destroyed South Africa, hasn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, I've just written an article on that uh, because it was meant to help what we, popularly call the previously disadvantaged.
Hmm.
Understandably so. There was a sector of our community that had experienced the hardships as a result of apartheid. That's understandable. But the manner in which they're going about it is actually prejudicing the very people it was designed for, because it's only a small black rising middle class elite that's benefiting from black economic empowerment, and other races are being discarded. That is one of the reasons why we have this brain drain, as we call it. Very qualified and skilled people leaving the country because there is no potential for growth. There's You are supposed to train a so-called black compatriot into a position while you being a senior, who is then going to usurp your seniority and go above you. Now, that does not make sense. It does not make productive sense, but it's happening, and it's going across the board, whether it's in the police force or in public sector or in the private sector. Everything has to become black, and coupled with the BBE is the aspect of transformation. And again, I wrote another article. Uh, at what point does transformation end? Yes, it was a noble concept or policy, but there comes a point when the expiry date has to happen. And it has long expired that, because there's a degeneration of the economy, of the social fabric of South Africa as a result of transformation, because that is leading and has led to what we call the entitlement clause, which is not obviously in the constitution. But many of our black compatriots believe they are entitled to the country by themselves, that it does not belong to anybody. I mean, this country belongs to everybody who lives in it. And race has got nothing to do with it. If you're a productive, law-abiding citizen, you have as equal right to every aspect or facility in this country as any other. So black economic empowerment is destroyed the country, destroying it, and is going to destroy it even further if it's not halted, and halted quick.
You've raised a very important issue, and that is that when you look at the real history of South Africa, the original inhabitants were the Khoi and the San people, and they were right across the country. And what happened was, in 1652, Jan van Riebeeck established a base in Cape Town, and that slowly expanded out across the Eastern Cape and up north. And up in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, in the early 1700s, so this is after white settlement, the Nguni people came through from the north, from Swaziland, into KZN because they could graze their cattle. That's why they stuck to the east side of Lesotho, because there was enough rain there to graze their cattle. That's a whole. They couldn't graze their cattle in the rest of South Africa. It's only when the white population went up into places like Kimberley, and of course on where Johannesburg is today, the Witwatersrand, and they established the mines, that they needed labour. That's when the Nguni or Zulu and Xhosa populations were trucked into those areas to act as cheap labour for the mines. That's the first time they came into those areas. So for these African politicians to suggest that these guys were kicked off their land by the whites is quite simply bullshit.
Yeah. No, I've always used this analogy. If you want, and you know, the colonialism aspect, the colonialist aspect is often invoked when the need arises. If you want to get rid of anything associated with colonialism, that's fine. Let the colonialists take their roads, their infrastructure, their buildings, and go, and you start from ground zero. You know, it's a pedantic argument, but you know, the analogy is to say you benefited from it. Of course, you were prejudiced by it, but now that we have the freedoms that we have, why not embrace all that we've had and achieved over the last many years, so that the future, those generations that we are supposed to provide for and set a better world for, can enjoy the fruits of our vision and wisdom.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll give you two examples of what we're talking about here. One is that little township or town called Arania, which is run by the Afrikaners, and it's the best run community in the whole of South Africa. And then we look at Durban. Now, Durban used to be a thriving, vibrant tourist city. They now call it Dirt Bin. Well, we know why we call it Dirt Bin. But that's been run by the ANC since 1994. And if you look at the tale of these two communities, you can see the chasm between competency and incompetency. And that brings us to this point of meritocracy versus cadre deployment. If you look at Singapore, it rebuilt itself in the 1960s. It's one of the most vibrant societies or communities in the world today, and it's been built on meritocracy. That's its whole foundation. What are your views on cadre deployment versus meritocracy, and how that has completely, once again, destroyed South Africa?
I don't know if you've been going through my emails, but I've been writing about these things very recently. Meritocracy is something I wrote about as well.
Yeah.
Look, if I can just go back, when I was reading for an MBA degree, there was a topic that we had comparing the American economy to the Japanese economy. And one of the things that came up was, you know, after the Hiroshima Nagasaki bomb attacks, one has to look at how Japan reinvented itself, restructured itself to one of the most productive and vibrant economies in the world.
Yeah.
Why? It was because of a mindset, of a culture. There was no friendship there. Everybody put their shoulders to the wheel and built back their country from ruins. Now, cadre deployment in South Africa, if it is removed, then you must know it's the end of the ANC, because they can't exist without cadre deployment, because each one props the other, whether it's in corruption or in devious tenders or whatever the case might be. But the moment we start introducing meritocracy into all aspects of South African life, we will see a rejuvenation of a new South Africa. To be quite blunt, we are in a new old South Africa, because something is happening that is not right. And the moment you bring friends into the game or family into the game, which is happening in every echelon of bureaucracy at the moment. I mean, Pietermaritzburg, for example, as you compare Durban, is in ruins. Just today, I had people complain about the state of that beautiful city that once was.
It was called the Garden City.
Yeah, it is. There's many businesses still called the Garden City, whatever and stuff.
Yeah,
But what I'm saying is, every little city is going to ruins because of this cadre deployment that is occurring at a rate of knots. And if you don't put someone who is black into a senior position, there's trouble. This bloody employment equity nonsense, which I am totally and vociferously against, is becoming the ruin of all South African bureaucracies, in whether it's provincial, national, or local. You know, and you have to put competent people. You've moved away to Australia. I mean, I've seen things about Australia. There's a level of competency. Of course, there's corruption all over. It might be there too, but I don't think it's on the scale that it is in South Africa. Once the public purse opened, the hands got longer, the pockets got deeper, and the thuggery and corruption has started. And if you take out cadre deployment, imagine how many people will be without a job. Because to introduce meritocracy is going to be the death knell for cadre deployment.
yeah. Well, look, I look at the case of Zweli Mkhize, who was the Minister of Health back during the COVID times. And South Africa was given 500 billion, that's with a B, rand, to actually help them go through or cater for COVID. I think it was by the World Bank. 200 billion rand of that was given to the banks to underwrite loans. That's 40% of the 500 billion rand. God knows what happened to that at the end of the day. The other 300 billion rand just disappeared into a big black hole with the ANC. I mean, surely, I know Zweli Mkhize is facing corruption charges and also crime for fraud. But he was one of the people who threw his hat in the ring to become president at the meeting in December, while he's facing criminal charges. This basically reflects what the ANC are, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Look, I've made it publicly known. There is not a single member of the ANC, and this has got nothing to do with color, not a single member of the ANC, from Ramaphosa to Praveen Gordhan to anybody down the line, who is capable of being a president of this country. But while saying that, we must also understand that the president of South Africa does not have the kind of executive powers we think he has. Like in South Africa, he has to refer to his top six or the NEC of the ANC. He cannot make a decision unilaterally in the interest of the country. So that 300 billion, I mean, I see him. Lately I've seen a lot of SUVs on the road. So, there could have been an outlet for that. But that's, just a joke aside. But yeah, the food chain in the ANC, and we have to point it out. People think we are always attacking the ANC. It's not attacking, it's the reality. It's what we can see for ourselves. The food chain is getting longer and longer and longer. And Zweli Mkhize, with his son, is also implicated in this possible corruption. And, I was surprised because at one stage I thought he was a capable person.
Yeah.
And sadly, each one of them, their skeletons get rather big once the cupboard opens.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Look, there's no perfect politician. That's true. But if you can do 90% of the things right in the interest of the people alone, then I think you're pretty successful, But in South Africa, the game has changed so drastically that each one of us are paying a price for this incompetence and thuggery and corruption and looting that is going on. Whether it's white collar or blue collar, it's happening across the board now.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder what happened to those 100 ambulance motorbikes. Remember those ambulance motorbikes that were paid for? I think it was 100 million rand or something. And
I think it was in Port Elizabeth.
Port Elizabeth, yeah. And you never heard about them again. I mean, you wonder what's happened to something like that. What a complete and utter farce that was.
Yeah, these are the things. I just heard this morning that the Matatiele municipality paid 1 million rand for a 5-day meeting at Mhlanga Rocks Gateway Hotel. There were 54 councillors who came for the meeting for 5 days. I don't know what meeting ever that is. I mean, even a national in Daba doesn't take so many days. And for 54 councillors, they booked 108 rooms. It's in
What?
the media. I kid you not. Each one was paid 3,000 rands for transport. Man, it frustrates me when I start talking about this because what they are in the Eastern Cape,
Yeah.
Matatiel seceded from KwaZulu-Natal into the Eastern Cape.
Matatiel actually
And
means where the birds have flown. That's a Zulu word. I don't know if you knew
okay,
that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't know that.
yeah. It's sort of east of Kokstad, and
Yes,
it's
yes.
yeah, it's a beautiful area. It's right near the Onkeluk Pass, which goes up into
But I
the
mean,
Lesotho.
yeah, an incident like that compared to the one that you're referring to, they all the same. I mean, 54 councillors booking 108 rooms. I'm sure there's going to be an investigation and something's going to come out of that. But it boggles the mind. It baffles you. Who made the decision?
Yeah.
How did they make the decision? Why did they make decision? That's such a decision, and at what cost? And who pays the price? It's the people. So those motorbikes, I think they've been taken to some township and revamped into some other form of transport.
Probably B and B's.
Probably.
Now, just getting back to Matatiel. Matatiel
Yeah.
has a population of about 3 or 4 thousand people.
Yes.
The
Yes.
town itself. So 1 million
Yes.
rand, you're looking at about what, about 25,000 rand per person who is actually living in the town, paid towards their little conference. That's huge.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's two and a
It,
half
it, it
thousand dollars each.
boggles the mind.
It
Boggles the mind.
absolutely
And
boggles the mind. Now we're talking about crime and corruption because I mean, let's face it, that is the anchor or the foundation of why South Africa's collapsed. Um,
right.
okay, when we look at the crime that's taken place, it isn't just since the Zuma era. It basically started as soon as the ANC came into power, didn't it?
Yeah. Look, the roots started. Well, the roots probably started before, but this gave them carte blanche to do as they please once the Mandela regime took over. So and it has never stopped or ceased. In fact, it has progressed to levels of syndication now, where
Now,
it's become higher,
just
quite
on
a
that.
lucrative.
Yeah, just on that syndication, I watched a cash in transit robbery taking place in Krugersdorp. Happened just earlier this week. And
Yes, yes, I saw
the
it.
professionalism of the people who participated in that crime was quite extraordinary. They even shot at the
Yeah,
helicopter that was going overhead and hit its fuel tank, and they had to land. But
yeah,
you know, these guys, if they've got explosives, they're far more trained than the South African National Defence Force. So what you've now got is these gangs who are so experienced in what they do that it's now become a lifetime work for them.
yeah. And my suspicion is this: that the gangs just don't sit around a campfire in a township and say, right, tomorrow we're going to do a cash in transit.
Mm.
There's deeper and more sinister associations that could go, that could surprise us as to where the origins of the plans come from and how it's
Absolutely.
manipulated. So, whilst we show our anger at these cash in transit heists, the planning is is from higher up. I can't with evidence say so, but it makes sense to even to at least look at such a thing. Because, like you said, the professionalism. I mean, if you're going to shoot, when last did you see a criminal shooting at a helicopter?
Yeah.
So they are planning the if there's an eventuality, how they respond to the security services.
Well, they're probably contracted by someone within the bank who knows where the money is going. I'm just talking about the bank. I worked for Barclays Bank in Greytown for about 5 or 6 years. And one of my jobs was on a Monday morning to take big parcels of cash. I'm talking about, the size of a Well, big parcels of cash. Let me put it that way. Probably about 15 inches long by about 10 inches high by about 15 inches wide. Big parcels. And there would be
Right.
about R500,000 in those parcels that I wheeled down on a trolley to the post office in Greytown. Right, I would wheel down the pavement. Didn't have a gun. I'd just come out the bank with these big parcels. It's clear what I'm carrying. Never had a problem. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't need the sort of sophistication you have today. Just one guy with a gun could have held me up and walked off with the parcels. Never ever happened.
Exactly.
That was the old South Africa. You look at it today,
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
Maybe they should go back to the system, wheel the money down the road, and they might still think it's in the van, in the cash in transit van.
Yeah,
And
have
use
an
it
empty
as-
cash in transit. That would fix it. But they would have
Yeah.
intel, let's face it. I mean, they've
Oh,
obviously,
yeah.
yeah. Now, let's just move on to a different area, because I just want to move away from crime now. What about
Right.
the infrastructure in South Africa? I mean, that has just gone to the dogs, hasn't it?
Absolutely. From every facet, whether it's roads or, I mean, for one, we have PRASA, the rail division of our transport system that's virtually defunct. We just got goods trains that are traveling, no passenger trains. The roads themselves, one of the, it's so dilapidated that the water infrastructure, well, let's leave Eskom, we've discussed that. But every other infrastructure that is worthy of note has been left to degrade itself without any attention. And people are paying substantial amount of taxes to have these kind of facilities available to them. That's what every citizen in the world does to the country, pay
Sure.
the taxes so that they can get delivery. And it is because we don't have competent people. We don't have people committed to service delivery in South Africa. Everybody wants to steal from the pie. And I mean, I don't know when last you've been to South Africa, but our road infrastructure is horrible. Barring the national roads, which is about okay, the toll roads. But the inner city roads and suburbs and stuff have deteriorated horrendously over the last decade or two.
Yeah. Well, look, I was looking at a video a couple of days ago about the Vaal Dam, and apparently there's been so much rain. Well, I've actually seen so many videos of it. There's been so much rain now in Gauteng, and especially
Yes.
in the southern part near Vereeniging, that the Vaal Dam is now sitting at 120% full. They've opened 12 sluice gates to let water out. They've got a total
Right.
of 60 that they should be able to open, and apparently 48 of them are broken. So they've only been able to open 12. And I was reading from or listening to this guy who's apparently the director of water in Gauteng, and he was saying that they've got 3,000 megaliters of water coming into the dam per second, and through the 12 sluice gates they can only release 2,300 megaliters of water per second. So every second
Sure.
you've got 700 megaliters of water building up behind that dam wall. And the big
Yeah.
concern they have now is, can the dam wall stay? Because apparently there's a crack somewhere in that dam wall, and they're worried about that. I mean, this just
If
shows
that
how
damn wall goes,
this just shows how the infrastructure has not been maintained in any aspect of society.
yeah, I mean, Durban is a classic example. We've had virtually a decrepit sewage system that is not being serviced the way it should be. And recently, I think last year, there was a spillage of raw sewage into the sea and in rivers. And there was a upsurge in the E. coli infections, and they had to ban the beaches from public use.
Yeah,
Now, this is a tourist attraction, as you earlier pointed out. And if you can't have the beaches available to tourists, especially, in peak holiday periods, what do you expect to give to the people? And they don't give a damn. we've got qualified and competent engineers, but they are not being brought into the fray to assist the municipality or the province as such. So, well, as you said earlier, the word shit is a reality in Durban, because sadly we have to mock our own city because of the city fathers.
Yeah.
It's ironic.
Well, we talked about Zweli Mkhize trying to stand as president, and then you had that female mayor of Durban who was caught up with talking about shit. She was caught up with a 200 million rand scam involving moving trash, and she's now the head of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, even though she's facing criminal charges. What does that say to you?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite crazy. Zandile Gumede.
Gamede,
That was the
that's right,
mayor.
Gamede, yeah. I mean, really,
You know,
it is a mafia state, or mafia country.
absolutely. I mean, I had to take it upon myself about 4 years ago to lay criminal charges against the municipality against DSW, which is the cleaning services for the municipality, for 139 million rand fraud, where tenders were awarded to people who had no idea as to how to service the orange bags to the communities. And that's one of the things that led to a major investigation, because the integrity unit of the municipality had a forensic report which the municipality was not acting on. They had it sitting on their desk
Yeah.
without acting on it. And yet it was a telling forensic report which implicated many people. Like I use the word food chain. There were lots in the food chain. Well, we hope at some point there'll be recoveries of funds, but that's wishful thinking.
Now, just on the other side of this, you've got these ANC cadres and the politicians who are on the take. I've seen so many videos of people basically running their hands through piles of cash and suitcases and stuff like that, and sort of, making out like they're super wealthy. And obviously these are criminal elements. But when you look at the other side of this, you've got the unemployment rate at about 50% plus of the population. And these people are on SASSA grants. Now, the way I understand it is that with the new budget that's just come out, the recipients of SASSA grants are going to get something like an extra 100 rand. Now, if you look at inflation in South Africa, that's like they've just lost 30% of their income when it comes to people who depend on social services.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've become a very social dependent state, and it's not the people's fault, it's the state's fault in so many respects. Firstly, not creating enough jobs, but now it has given people this kind of dependency, which is a serious problem because, and if I can just move a little away just to explain what I'm trying to explain.
Go ahead.
A lot of young girls become pregnant early, in the teenage years. And now they are requiring assistance. They don't have any form of financial income, and they have to leave their little infants with either their gogos or their mothers in the farms or far away. Yet when they receive the 350, it doesn't go to the child. It goes to them doing their hairs, putting these new hairdos and stuff like that. So, everything's gone pear-shaped here, from the thinking to the youth to everything. So the social grant that the government is offering is also a political tool, because closer to the election they might increase it for various reasons. And all it takes for a poor person is to get an extra chicken in his kitchen or a bag of mealie meal for him to put a cross against the name. So, it's a tactical strategy to entice the vulnerable and the uneducated as well.
Well, I think the SASSA could be the elephant in the room, and I'll tell you why. Because, as you mentioned earlier, there's such a brain drain happening in South Africa, and that brain drain is the upper class, the wealthy people. They've had enough. They're moving to places like Australia, like America, like Canada, like Europe. They're getting out of South Africa in their thousands at the moment. And there goes your tax
Yes.
base. Now, without that tax base, you cannot afford to pay SASSA because you can't
Yeah.
create money out of fresh air. And if you look
Yeah.
at the dependence now on the tax base, well, the percentage of the tax base that now is spent on SASSA, it's huge. And then the other
Yeah.
percentage that's huge is debt, the interest. And these two,
Our debt,
the,
80% of foreign debt,
yeah,
interest only.
these two huge amounts of money are going to come in and clash when you run out of tax. Because without tax,
Yeah.
you cannot pay the bills. So
Yeah.
I think the crisis in South Africa might not be so much Eskom, which is obviously a contributing factor, but I think the real crisis is going to be when they run out of tax. And what I'm hearing now is that the South African Tax Office or South African Revenue Service is now actually going after people to pay tax when they don't even owe any tax. So they're actually now trying
Yeah.
to they're trying to scam people who shouldn't pay tax into paying tax. This is what I'm hearing. And if you try and respond, if you try and send a letter, if you try and phone them, you never get a response. And then they send you penalties on top because you haven't paid within a certain time. So it's a scam.
Yeah. In fact, today was our budget speech by the Minister of Finance, and he
Yeah.
indicated how they're trying to ensure that taxes are being paid. I think they recovered to the end of February or January over 167 billion. But like you said, sooner rather than later, if more and more people leave the country, they are not only depleting the productivity of the country, but the resources to provide for tax. And each time a person goes, there's a chunk, minuscule as it might seem in the bigger picture, but as more and more people go, the picture the value becomes greater and greater. And the idea behind our foreign debt, I mean, we are servicing 80% of our foreign debt with interest.
Wow.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
And then we go around with the begging bowl to Davos, asking for investments. Now, like you said earlier, it'll be only an idiot who will want to come and invest in South Africa when productivity is minimized by load shedding and all the other associated problems.
Yeah. No, look, it's an absolutely chaotic situation. Look, I'm going to wrap up this live stream shortly, Narendh, but look, it's been fantastic chatting to you and getting your perspective on things. There are two areas we haven't covered yet, and in fact, there are three. We have actually covered the economy, but education and health. Now, health is in a complete disaster. Education is likewise. Do you have any comments to make about those two areas in South Africa at the moment?
Yeah, actually, I'm very passionate about the two because I believe an educated nation is a productive nation.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a system of education that actually handicaps the child from early on in their life. Firstly, our schools are overloaded, overcrowded, which makes teaching unconducive, to proper learning. We've got demotivated teachers. We've got a Minister of Education who cannot read figures herself.
Yeah, I heard that. Stunning.
Surprisingly, she was a lecturer for 9 years at Wits University. I'm not sure in which department or what subject.
Probably the cleaning department, I would say.
Yeah. And as for our health system, we're planning on this national health system. But the problem is, it looks good on paper, but we don't have the infrastructure or money to implement it. And it's going to fail. But it's another electoral tool that the government or the ANC is using. Free healthcare, blah. I mean, if you remember clearly, when South Africa turned democratic in '94, Nelson Mandela made it clear that there will be free medication for children under 6 and pregnant mothers and stuff. Within 3 or 4 months, the state hospitals were depleted of their pharmaceutical stock. So this national health system if we are not collecting enough taxes, how are you going to pump it into a system that require billions for revamp? It doesn't make sense, logical or fiduciary sense. So that is a failed system. Every subject we can speak on about South Africa at the moment is a failed system or a failing system.
Narendh, which brings me to another elephant in the room. And that elephant is, let's say, hypothetically, Eskom fails. And if Eskom fails, there are going to be riots in the street. It's going to be chaos. Okay, so let's take a hypothetical scenario where there's anarchy in South Africa. The government folds. There's no government. Do you think that that's a perfect opportunity for certain areas in South Africa to declare independence from the chaos of South Africa? I'm talking about like the Western Cape, Orania, the KwaZulu, the Zululand area. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think there's a political party that wants to secede the Western Cape.
There is the Cape Independence Party.
Yeah, they did indicate contact me sometime in 2021 to join them. But look, that could very well be a reality, because the moment someone is seeing it and you close off the borders, because obviously you're not going to have a functional military. The police are going to be in disarray, because and you must remember something, and this was proven in 2021. The people of South Africa are not stupid. There's come a time when, if they need to defend themselves, they will. Be it a 9mm or a rifle or some high-powered weapon. People are armed, but nobody wants an armed revolution. Nobody wants anarchy or violence. But the reality is, if it comes, there is always the possibility of a secession. Look, Orania can border itself, blanket itself from any outside influence, and then it will mean a war. But if your government is failed, who's going to give the orders? And people will be more interested in trying to loot whatever is left in the stores, than go for anything bigger,
Yeah. Now look, just touching on Orania. Orania has a growth rate of 16% per annum. That's 16%. Fastest growing community in the country. They're just building 500 more properties. They're actually selling 500 more plots of land, and apparently they're sold out, just like that. So it is. People recognize it as a secure harbour. It's rather like what Saitlanders are doing. Now,
maybe I'll make a turn there and apply for immigration status there and ask them if they'll allow me.
Narendh, I'm going to wrap this up now. Is there a message you have for people listening to this live stream?
Yeah, my appeal is mainly to the youth of South Africa. Get involved in the civics and the politics of our country. You don't have to become a politician, but understand what is happening, because there's going to be battles coming your way that you may never imagine. And if we do not take interest in and become a real patriot of your country, you're going to lose the country and probably yourself if we don't take a stand now.
Right. Okay. Narendh, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you. You have a great morning.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye.
All right, guys. That was Narendh Ganesh, and very interesting discussion. It's always nice to get different perspectives on things. I'm going to go out now with that theme song, Op Ons Rots. And have a great evening, everybody, and thanks to the mods for the great work that you do. And don't forget, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. Let me see who we've got on. It's actually up there on the Loving Life TV program, but let's just get it up. So, tomorrow night we have Colin Weir. This is going to be an interesting discussion. We're going to be talking about South African Airways Technical. And, of course, that's a very, very hot subject. Then we got Dr. Elapan Rapiti on Friday. And then, of course, I have a break on the weekend. So, tomorrow night is Colin Weir, who's a air safety expert. And Friday night is Dr. Ella Penrapidi. Have a great evening, guys. Hope to see you tomorrow night. And here we go with Op Ons Rots. Bye for now.
Ons loop hand aan hand op goue warm sand, so baie wat ek wil hê, so baie dit brand. Ek staan op my rots met golwe wat bots. Ons het geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, hallo glo, want hy is in beheer. Waai sterk, dis kragte wat werk. Die gevoel in my hart, dis vrees wat wil brand. Ons is boere met trots, met my hand teen my bors. Ons ken geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, hallo glo, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien wat gebeur, die leuen sal ons nie steen. Kom staan nog 'n keer, ek is stil, want ek weet hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, hallo glo, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen.